Welcome to the School of Christian Mysticism meditation on the Gospel of Mark. This is our second session on Mark's Gospel, in which we'll continue with chapter 1 of the Gospel, reading verses 16 to 34 inclusive. This is in preparation for our meditation session, which everybody can join in with. It's a discussion, a preliminary discussion between the three of us that will be posted on YouTube, so that people, if they wish, can watch that before the meditation. And we'll do this in three sections, 3 readings. After the first reading, we'll have a general discussion about our first impressions, more from using our sort of intellect. After the second reading, we'll move into Lectio Divina, and after the third reading, we'll have a time of silent contemplation. So we'll begin with the first reading from Tim.
Beginning at verse 16. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, not as the scribes. Just then, there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, throwing him into convulsions and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening, at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. What strikes me on that reading immediately, well, that's a word that Mark seems to like to use quite a lot, at least our translation of the word, straight away, immediately. But what strikes me straight away is this this kind of almost frantic action in the way that Mark tells the narrative, and the things that happen in that short space of writing are diverse and dense with action, really. And yet there's Jesus almost still in the way that he deals with it all.
Mm.
So there's fame growing almost instantly, commotion, desperate need of people, the frantic nature of the demoniac, the demon kind of mentality of mind or spirit, and yet Jesus,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yes. So still. Mm-hmm.
Mm. And then the comments about authenticity and authority, which this stillness seems to be evoking in the people who
Mm.
are watching.
Mm. Yes. I think what struck me this time about the calling of the first disciples, well, it's not the sea, it's a lake, isn't it? But like he's walking on the edge of the ocean, isn't he? He's in that place of mediation between eternity and temporality. And he calls people who are already a bit familiar with the ocean, with the sea, and he kind of reassigns them. And they were mending his nets, James and John. They seem to have the skills already. They can fish, they can go on the sea, they can mend their nets. And it's electric, isn't it? He calls them and they get up and go. It's the impact of his being must have been so extraordinary.
I'm reminded of stories of some spiritual masters, including those in India who teach in silence, and for those who are ready to receive, just merely being in the presence of one of these great masters is sufficient to completely turn somebody around.
Yes.
Just being in the presence, and how much more so with Jesus, the great master, who obviously also showed that ability totally, that these people were just completely turned around, just left the worldly things they were doing and just followed him. And But yet the worldly things they were doing, as you rightly point out, were a metaphor, really, a metaphor for what they were called to do. They realized that in some kind of a way. This was spoken to them in some kind of a way. Yeah.
There's something in us that responds to Christ, isn't there? Though initially we are not aware of any particular transformation going on in our being, but when we respond to Christ, we, at least in my memory, I remember how looking back at certain events of life seemed to make sense when they didn't make sense at the time. And the sea, of course, is for the Hebrew perspective of the time of Jesus, and no doubt before and maybe after, is the place where all the chaos is, where the demons are, where the sea monsters are, and it's a symbol of great turmoil and reality of it, to be feared in many ways. And yeah, so no wonder he's calling people who are already engaged in chaos and fear, and then says, well, just come on, now's the time, come with me. And then we've got the chaos of the sea within the guy who's got the demon.
Interesting. And really interesting way to put that in.
Yeah, and it'll be picked up, as we know, of course, as Jesus walks on the water and so on later on.
Yeah, so it's just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Well, shall we talk about that? This instruction that Jesus makes to the demons, that they should be silent and come out of him, be quiet, don't reveal who I am.
Yeah.
So why do we think? Because what one could think, on the other hand, on the one hand, yeah, this is exactly what's required to recognize him, and this is an instruction which he repeats, isn't it? When he heals somebody, don't tell anybody. There's something very important here, certainly about keeping things enclosed and secret, and so that they can work within rather than be wasted without. But do you two have further thoughts or inspirations about this?
Yeah, I feel something about it. But, I'm wondering about Malcolm, if you have something right now.
I'm just reminded of the instruction not to cast pearls before swine, which always seems like a very sort of harsh thing to say, but if people are not ready to hear, then hearing can actually be damaging, of course. And it is a process that takes place in silence. Silencing the demons is what we do, isn't it? And if they then are not silent, to actually go out inappropriately talking to people with half understood nonsense, then it's going to do more harm than good.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk in this time in which we find ourselves, if such a thing could even mean anything, but about a collective consciousness that is changing. A lot of people seem to be talking about, and some link it to the age of Aquarius, and others link it to other kind of prophecies, and others link it to psychology or collective psychology. But of a shift in collective consciousness, but if Jesus in any moment says, okay, demons and everything that's in the universe and every kind of consciousness that is possible, tell them now, then there's no transformation taking place for anybody on any kind of individual level. It seems to me that Christ speaks to each of us through our lives. And sometimes we might respond, other times we might be completely deaf to it, and so on. But if it was all just laid out there like a map, then what would be the point? What would be the point of life? Where would love be in that? Where would growth be? Where would insight be? We'd just all be washed with the knowledge of everything, and it'd be just like back to the tree in the garden of the knowledge of good and evil. We just explode. It'd be like Malcolm was giving us the story of Moses earlier in morning prayer, where God says to Moses, look, I'm going to put my hand over your face, and I'm going to put you in a cave so that you don't see my face when I pass by. I'm going to show you my glory, but you look in my face and it's just going to, you die. You'll just die. It's a bit like that, I think.
I think we are in a time of transformation, but much of that transforming power is working outside of the institutional church, I think. And it's sometimes, sadly, within the institutional church that doctrines are set out saying this is how it is, and it becomes empty words for people who are not ready to receive those words. Just, is that the demon speaking? That's a bit radical. But if a message is put out to people that doesn't transform them but actually puts them off, then what's that about?
Yes, or drives them mad.
Yeah.
Had he finished, Malcolm?
Yes, I think so.
Well, not entirely, I'm sure. I was thinking about these powerful experiences of transformation that on retreat through spiritual practice, and how much holding that requires, and also in a not dissimilar way. For example, at least two, if not more, of my friends have gone on a ayahuasca experience. One at least to South America, and with those and another to will be going to the States, and out in a Native American sort of style, similar sort of retreat. But with the ayahuasca, it's like this is a totally consciousness changing experience. But these not all of them, I'm sure, but these retreats, these experiences are very carefully monitored. As I say, I'm sure that some of them are not, but the experiences that I have learned about, and so that, yeah, that integration of the experience is a possibility. I'm thinking here, I'm feeling here that, like in the calling, when we talk about me or I, we're perhaps not distinguishing what me or I is responding. For example, in the calling, I feel that the soul of these disciples responded. There was nothing logical about it, rational. They fell in love at that moment. That's soul to me. With Tim, you said something about the work to be done, and I was thinking, I think that perhaps is the area that our souls already know. Our souls already are in love and melting into the beloved, into the Christ. But the rest of us, our ego self, does need to go through this transformation, this transformative process, this learning and teaching. It is the essence of incarnation, isn't it? That we have bodies, we have minds, we have egos, and they need to be clarified to express the soul's knowing. Yeah.
Was it Einstein who had a vision as a young man of what it would be like to sit on a beam of light, traveling at the speed of light? And he knew then that his theory of relativity was right, but couldn't explain why, and spent much of the rest of his life working up a proof for it. Seems to be a bit like that. There's the transformation, which is totally beyond understanding, but just known. You just know it. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to understand it.
Yeah.
Something like that. Something like that.
Yeah, and to integrate it. I keep thinking of Irina Tweedy. I don't know if you know the Daughters of Fire, Chasm of Fire. It's a woman in her 50s. Husband just died. Went out to India and discovered a Sufi master, not of the Sufis with which I'm familiar, but called Baisab. And he recognized in her her potential for, because he then handed his he having transmitted to her, she became the head of the order, is what I mean. And he saw that in her at the beginning, and he gave her an appalling time. Her diary, which he asked her to write or told her to write, describes in detail the rigors which he put her through to condition her ego, let's say. And at the same time, while he was doing this to her, he was teaching, while she was sitting there, the rest of the people who went to see him, with love, with evident love, compassion, and it was a very tortuous experience for her. But she recognized in the end, obviously, that his love for her, and his insight into her level of consciousness and potential level was she recognized that it was out of love, so there's something about what we're talking about in that, what we need, and what Jesus is exposing people to, different people to different things. I'm not quite sure how it exactly all fits in and adds up, but anyway, that came to me. So.
Just picking up on Einstein as well, presumably what he was trying to do after being enlightened in that particular way, literally, was to present that in a way that others could benefit from. And maybe that's what we are doing with the gospel. We are being transformed. The transformation process is not finished. It's ongoing, but we're trying to find words to bring this light, and we can't find the words. We struggle every time we get together to do that, and we do it in many ways, in all day, every day. But yeah, in the end, we need to come back to, in this case, the text of Mark, I suppose, and read it again gently.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let's do that. And Tim, you might have to leave us any moment, might you?
I do. I'm going to disappear now.
The second reading. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, throwing him into convulsions, and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening, at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. The whole
Immediately they left their nets and followed him.
The whole city gathered around the door. He took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her.
The fever left her, and she began to serve them.
Lifted into service.
Jesus said to them, "Follow me."
Leave your nets. Follow me, I will lift you up.
Have you come to destroy us? Destroying the demon.
He lifted her up, and the fever thoughts, egoic, playings out, left her.
Destroying the demons of the ego. Casting them out. Forbidding them to speak to others.
In my small self, I think I am God, and that I see God. And that's not accurate to the situation.
Good reading. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat, mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men. Followed. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, come out of him." And the unclean spirit, throwing him into convulsions and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick and possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him.